This episode of the Oh No 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 podcast is sponsored by Dynamic Industrial Services, the rope access specialists. The roof of the South Stand at Starch Park is some 19 metres above the pitch, the same height as 11 Aidan Connolly's. But as we all know, there's only one Aidan Connolly, and so you'd be much better off with Dynamic Industrial Services. DIS specialise in working at height, offering a range of services including maintenance, inspection and repair. To find out more, visit dynamicindustrialservices.co.uk.
In 1951, neo-Dadaist painter and graphic artist Robert Rauschenberg created the first of his monochromatic works that would come to be known as the White Paintings. Each one was a large canvas covered in nothing more than a single layer of white house paint, which drew praise from many for its demonstration of aesthetic purity and infinity. Others, however, looked at something so featureless and devoid of interest and wondered if there was anything you could say about it at all. And on an entirely unrelated note, this is the Oh No 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 podcast, and we're going to talk about Greenock Morton 0, Wraith Rovers 0. My name is Duncan Cameron, and my fellow critics for this one are Scott Fleming. First of all, how are you, Scott?
Yeah, I'm really good actually. Just I think I said it last week that it gets to this point of the season, you kind of get picked back up again for playoffs, and then it's like, well, what league are we going to be in next season and stuff like that. So it's I'm looking forward to the next. Well, despite yesterday being a bit boring, but I'm looking forward to the next few weeks anyway.
Excellent, good. And we've also got Callum Blythe as well. How about you, Callum?
This was certainly one of the games of all time.
Yeah, and as much as
the game happened.
Yeah, it was a game that took place. Like, some football happened.
Football.
To some degree. Yeah. I know what you mean though, Scott. Like, we got to the end of the game yesterday. It's like, yeah, basically nothing happened. Very little of any interest, as we will, somehow attempt to talk about over the next little bit. And it got to the end, and my dad turned to me and he was like, I really enjoyed that. It's like, yeah, I kind of did too. I think it's nice having, like, sort of low risk, low jeopardy, just like a nice bit of football to enjoy for a change.
It's just a day out. It's just a day out at that point.
That was what I said. Sometimes it's nice just to be outside. And, yeah, all this title races and all that kind of stuff comes with a load of stress. It's quite fun, just taking a lot of the jeopardy out of it. And on a more kind of serious point, genuinely I think is very helpful with the playoffs still to come, kind of for everybody, having that little buffer period where we've got these kind of 2 or 3 games to kind of keep everything ticking over, and then like a week off. It's much preferable to being in that kind of position where, you just miss out on the last day and suddenly all the attitude and everything's all got to change. But in terms of this one, I think we might end up, kind of setting a new record for ourselves for the kind of shortest time we take to recap a full game. But let's start where we always do and have a look at the lineups and all that kind of stuff. So in the preview on Thursday night, I think Christina had the idea, and it was backed up by everybody, to give Louis Vaughan and Sam Stanton the afternoon off, and I think send them mini-golfing was possibly the suggestion. But they were both forced to kind of endure an afternoon in Greenock. But there were days off for Josh Mullen, for Jack Hamilton, and for Dylan Easton. Scott, are you reading anything into that? Do you think that's just a perfectly reasonable thing to do at this stage of the season?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think we kind of were in agreement anyway on the podcast on Thursday that it's sensible to just ask the guys, how are you feeling? Do you feel tightness? Do you feel anything at all? Because, I mean, if you've got anything at all, you're going to be wanting them in 3 weeks' time. instead of yesterday. Like, we could have fielded whoever yesterday. It wouldn't have really mattered what happened. If he'd even lost 3-0, it wouldn't have mattered. But it's more to the fact that it was clear that obviously Hamilton's maybe still struggling a bit after he got taken off on Friday last week, so they've probably just said, look, what's the point in risking you? And then the same with Easton and Mullen, I would imagine they must have a little niggle or something, because I don't see Ian Murray taking everybody else and not them two if they're not carrying anything. So, no, I think I would have preferred to maybe have seen a couple of different changes as well on top of what was already forced into it. I was quite early in to say that I wanted also Stanton and Kev to not play. Just I wanted them to play this Friday and not play the Morton game, just so that they've had a sort of week off and then they're back into they've played again. Because I think if you were to give somebody the last 2 games off, it's a long time then to have not played a game to go into the first leg of the semi-final. So, no, I think it's sensible to just go with the guys that are fully fit and ask anybody at this point in the stage, look, are you carrying anything? If not, we'll have you in the squad.
Yeah, I think it's a case of, it's like, if the squad was bigger, you would have more changes there. You actually at a certain stage just run out of other guys that you can play. I mean, Keith Watson was officially named on the bench, but I didn't see him all afternoon yesterday. It wasn't even so much as a kind of cursory jog down the touchline for a warm-up at any point. So I think very much a case of just playing the guys you have to play. You've got to put an 11 out, but fundamentally, it's like, mission number 1 was trying to get back out without any injuries or anything like that. I will actually just say, just on because it was pretty unanimous on Thursday night about swapping out Kevin Dabrowski for Andy McNeil. Well, I think Robbie wanted Robbie Thompson in. I think he's just in cahoots with the Thompson family, to be perfectly honest. I quite like just the continuity of just sticking with your goalkeeper, just getting minutes as much as anything. You obviously always run the risk that somebody could get hurt or pick up a mad red card or something. But I think with your goalkeeper, it's less likely. You've got less chance of injury. So I was quite happy to see him just kind of continuing on there. And then probably the other kind of real note of interest in the starting lineup, for me anyway, was Ross Matthews going back in at right back. So we saw him do that at Hampden a good few weeks ago now. And I think Graham in particular had been kind of asking for that, with the possibility that we might not have James Brown, depending on how some of the permutations in the playoffs kind of play out. Callum, in terms of that, were you quite pleased to see kind of Ross Matthews in at right back, and was there anyone else that you were particularly kind of hoping to see or you thought might be rested?
Not really. Like Easton was rested because he had a back strain. I think for other players, not really too fussed when it comes to resting. And with Matthews being played at right back, it's like when I first seen the team sheet, I was thinking, are we playing it with 3 at the back? Are we doing the 3-5-2, 3-4, whatever, 3-6-1, Murray ball, whatever? But no, to see him playing at the right back, it is something that we're probably going to have to look at for these games, because obviously if we do play St Johnstone, then we don't have James Brown, who's been our starting right back since our previous right back's disappearance. So we need to get him minutes, getting used to playing in that system, because if we get Ross County, then we lose out on Kyle Turner, and that's admittedly easier to deal with because we do have the players who play in that position, whereas for right back it's Brown and Matthews.
Yeah, that's it, absolutely it. I think all things being equal, I think people would generally recognise Kyle Turner as a better player than James Brown. I don't think that's a particularly kind of controversial thing based on what we've seen from over the last couple of seasons. But you're absolutely right. Based on the makeup of the squad that we've got at the moment, Kyle Turner's quite simply an easier one to replace or to kind of cater for the loss of than James Brown. But I do like from what Ross Matthews at right back, from what I've seen. I thought he was excellent. I think he was the man of the match in the game at Hampden when he played right back. And I don't know that there's many kind of tougher assignments that you get at right back than yesterday. I mean, all right, nobody was exactly trying their hearts out or anything, but Robbie Muirhead's always going to be a tough ask if you're filling in at right back. You know, he's got. He basically is just a big number 9 physically, but obviously peeling off onto that left side. And I thought Ross Matthews coped with him pretty well. It was a good kind of battle over the time that he was on the park. And I certainly wouldn't be worried about going into games with Ross Matthews at right back. I'm pretty happy with what I've seen from him so far. Going into the game itself, we'll kind of run through, I don't know, some of the notable incidents, such as they were. So, I mean, I think really over the course of this game, I don't think there was much beyond half chances, really. I don't think there's anything that you could really point at and say, you know, there was a big chance there. There's kind of one in the first half. There's a good bit of running from the Rovers through the midfield. Scott McGill, I thought, was very good, kind of middle to front, driving through kind of for the whole game. Is kind of his decision making maybe not quite where he would want it to be, whether that's just lack of minutes or anything like that. Just, you know, a couple of shots that he snatched at, and one or two times you think he could have had a shot and he kind of went wide instead. But a good bit of running, and he kind of plays in Callum Smith. Lovely bit of movement from Callum Smith, kind of Jamie Gullining out to the left wing and then coming inside for a shot. Forced a save out of the goalkeeper. And then probably the best chance of the game, well, I mean, certainly the best chance of the game in terms of the fact that George Oakley scores, but he's denied by a very, very late flag from the linesman. Callum, I know you saw the highlights. Having looked at that back, do you think he's offside or do you not?
I thought the thing is, it's like it was a player coming back to receive the ball that I thought was offside. I didn't even think about Oakley being offside. It wasn't until sharing it, and it's like you look at it, it's like with the highlights, the camera is a little bit obscured for Oakley, but he does, like, you can use like the lines on the grass, because thankfully they're pretty much standing on it, and you can just sort of tell by how he's standing that he's got like a foot over that line. It's a natural VAR, thankfully, for this. Thank you, Morton groundsman. But yeah, I thought he was offside. Although I think he was saying where it's like, for whatever reason, it seemed like the referees were in charge of this game, but from a different time zone. Just like every decision would be like 10-15 seconds after the event.
It did seem like, Colin Stephen was kind of operating on a delay. Like he was watching the game through a satellite phone. Odd, and that one with the linesman is the same, where I thought it was very tight, and I was actually sat almost perfectly in line with it. I thought it was very, very tight at the time. So obviously, just naturally, people claim for the offside, whether it's, you know, whether you think it's offside or not. It's tight enough that you're going to claim for it. And there was enough time. There was kind of 2 beats where you think, they've not flagged them, that's a shame. And you can see in the highlights as well, George Oakley has a proper look at the linesman and then like turns away and is already celebrating, and then the flag goes up. It's a very odd one.
The linesman's just fucking with him.
Yeah,
it's like, just you thought you got a goal. Flag is up.
You thought something interesting was going to happen this afternoon.
No.
Think again. It's a lovely finish, though. I'll say that for George Oakley. I think most strikers take a touch for that as it comes at them, just to kind of set themselves, and he just kind of turns it nicely into the in the bottom corner. Scott, I'm already vamping for time. Anything you want to say about that? It's about the most interesting thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you say, you mentioned actually about Scott McGill. It just reminded me yesterday, my dad was watching the game via stream as well, and he sent me a message, and I just started laughing because it was also what was in my mind at the time, was that when Scott McGill got within 30 yards of the goal, it was almost like he pulled a pitching wedge out and used it on his foot. Because like anything he used, it just went so high in the air, or it went so wherever, and everyone was just going, yeah, you can tell he's not really played a lot of games. But yeah, it must be tough for somebody that's probably sat on the bench basically since October, because he played a wee bit at the start of the season in terms of few games at full back, few games coming off the bench and stuff like that. But then once we kind of were back to our defence wasn't sort of injury prone at that point, sort of November to Christmas, and then again he got the odd sub appearance sort of in January, but yeah, he's not really played a lot of games, so you can't really blame him for sort of being not training's totally different to games as well, so you can't ask him just to be up to scratch straight away. But other than that, I thought he was fairly solid in the game. As you say, yeah, Callum Smith, it was very, now you say it, it's very Jamie Gillin-esque coming off that wing and then just cutting in with his shot. It looked a decent save, so no, I would say that was probably our best chance of the first half. I mean, Connolly was given plenty of effort up that right-hand side, but I thought Connolly was far more involved in the second half. And then, yeah, Rudden, I mean, he didn't really do too much, but it was, yeah, I think when he's up there by himself and he didn't have like a Vaughan or anybody like that up beside him, he probably was a bit too isolated for what he needs. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't a game that we were likely to go and try and win 9-10-0 because we knew that the league was done by that time. So no, and then yeah, I agree that the goal, it's tight, very tight, but I do think that it's just ever so slightly offside. And as Callum says, it probably does actually help the linesman out that the pitch has been cut side to side, because then it's easier to see the light and dark line to see where somebody's said foot or leg is in comparison to the defender. So no, yeah, I'm also the same. I think that was really the only two high. I mean, Morton had a few sort of shots just going past the post and stuff like that, but Kev dived for just diving's sake. I don't think he actually thought he was going to need to save them. But yeah, other than that, it was just kind of 0-0 was very much the fair score at halftime.
As someone who has experience of playing goal, it does get boring. So I think he was just doing that just to keep himself occupied.
Wouldn't surprise me. They're a bizarre bunch, goalkeepers. So,
and that's why I've won.
Yeah, I've got two other kind of incidents noted down for the first half, and it's both of them. It's kind of Morton kind of running clear almost. But there's one that's just a ball over the top, and it's Robbie Muirhead, and Matthews does well to kind of keep him wide, and then he just had a wild shot at it, which it's just, again, you're like, yeah.
Oh,
in the middle of the season,
300 Rovers fans just going.
Wait. It's like
he was
that, and it's just like there's no goals being scored in this game. Nothing is coming.
He was getting. Understandably, it wasn't over the top or unusual by any means. He was getting a bit of stick in the first half when he was kind of down in front of that bit in the main stand that we were at, and he was turning around and he was giving a fair bit back, and I couldn't really work out what the gist of it was. But actually, there was a fair bit of enjoyment when he just had that wild swing of that. But I think if it's not a meaningless game, I don't think he just swings at that. I think he ends up trying to come back and find someone. Fine. And then about 2 minutes after that, there's a very similar one where George Oakley, I mean, not known for his pace typically, but really kind of cooks you and Murray out on that right-hand touchline. Kind of goes by him and then gets away from him. But again, it's quite similar. But the point where he actually gets the shot away, he's just has a big wild swing at it. And yeah, it's not within a postcode of troubling. Ken Dabrowski, probably the only other thing from the first half then was Zach Rudden did go off. I would hope or assume fairly precautionary. Obviously, no great need to take any risks with anyone. He'd had a couple of bumps in a couple of minutes, actually. Took a head knock and he'd taken another one, and then he eventually gets the third one. And Scott Brown comes on at that point. Ian Murray saying in his interview that he didn't actually intend to give Scott Brown any minutes at all. He was planning on just resting him. But again, the size of squad that we've got, you can't help that. There's no sense in risking Zach Rudden when you do have someone who's fit who can at least come on, even if you would rather they have a bit more of a rest. And I thought Scott Brown actually did kind of change the game a little bit. I mean, changed it from this bit to slightly further this way in terms of how it actually moved. The overall pattern of the game was still nothing happened. But as you said, Scott, the first half, if all the Rovers highlights in the first half, it's basically running from the halfway line. The chances that we had, it's all driving forward, and it's Rudden maybe laying off or Stanton laying off, and then you've got McGill carrying it forward. Whereas the second half, and I think primarily because of Scott Brown's influence, there was a bit more kind of passing it through, getting it to Aidan Connolly when he was already within 30 yards of the touchline, as opposed to having to carry it 30 yards first. But yeah, beyond that, the kind of chances were kind of a similar standard in the second half. Sam Stanton has a kind of snapshot from distance. From the edge of the box, which the keeper does well to get down to. And then there's another one which Aidan Connolly has a shot from about kind of 25 yards. And I think actually Ryan Mullen, the goalkeeper, deserves a fair bit of credit for making that look very, very straightforward. He just moves his feet very quickly and gets across to it and gets behind it. But I think a lot of goalkeepers are kind of having to scramble and push that away. Callum, you've self-anointed yourself the goalkeeping expert, so I'm going to come to you on this. Ryan Mullen, one of the more impressive goalkeepers in the division, do you think, this season?
I've not really seen much of him, but Morton does. He does. Whenever we do play him, he does look like a pretty good goalkeeper. He's pretty solid. He's a solid championship goalkeeper, and it's like the saves that he had to make. He made them.
It's basically those
he did his job.
I think that's it. I think it's pretty much 3 saves he had to make yesterday. He was one down to his right from Callum Smith in the first half, and then gets down to that Sam Stanton one, and he gets behind Aidan Connolly's, and there's not an awful lot else for him to do. Scott, the rest of the kind of second half, there's one big header for Callum Smith, but other than that, I think even going by the highlights package, there's some work for kind of Kevin Dabrowski to do, and I think there's some of the good and some of the bad from Big Kev contained in the highlights. Give me your thoughts on some of that, please.
All I can say is I'm kind of glad it wasn't really windy, because it gave me a little bit Arbroath vibes, some of the stuff that was going on in the second half. There was especially just that one chance where he went to punch the ball twice in the space of 10 seconds, and twice he sliced it and didn't get anywhere near the contact he wanted on it. And yeah, if that game meant something and that came to a goal, you could just imagine what folk would have been getting on his back for doing that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, they never scored a goal from it, but they also the game didn't really mean too much, so it also is not going to get highlighted too much. Obviously, we're speaking about it now, but there's not many people going to remember it. It didn't come to a goal, so at the end of the day, he's done what he needed to do at the end. But I do think that it's still a little bit worrying for me when it comes to cross balls. I'm not going to lie, any game that I've been at this season, I think I've managed to actually be at the ground maybe 8 or 9 times this season. And all 8-9 games, the folk around me, I can always hear them saying, "Oh God, it's a corner. And everybody knows it's because they're like, oh, well, if they pin Kev, or if they've got guys surrounding him, and he doesn't get the first contact on it, the worry is that he's either going to flap at it and it's going to fall to somebody, or somebody's just going to get in ahead of him. So I don't know. Obviously, he's got a very good goalie coach in Robbie Thompson, and Robbie's been really highly touted by a lot of teams in terms of he coaches actually other goalies for other teams, how to coach goalies and stuff like that. So I don't think there's going to be stuff that they're not doing in training. I think it's just a case of he's still really young. He's still first full season as a starting goalie. He's going to make mistakes, and I just hope that we're going to start to eventually see these sort of improvements, that he will start coming and collecting more crosses than just slapping at them or just trying to punch them. Because there's sometimes where I think, see if he just catches it, he'll actually relax the whole defence and just take the pressure off. Whereas I think even though he thinks, oh, it's probably safer to punch it, at the end of the day, you're still giving them a chance to maybe pick up the second ball off of where he's sort of punching it to. So, yeah, he is very much a very modern day goalie when it comes to that sort of thing. But yeah, it's
a lot more difficult to get to like a catch if his body's in the way. It's because obviously it's like when you go to catch it, you want to bring it towards yourself, but it's like if you got bodies in the way, there's a risk of it, like hitting off with someone and like floundering about. So it is avoiding that. But
I think my
so the ones where he did flap, it did look like it was like players going into him or like getting in the way. But like you're saying, it's his first full season as a starting goalkeeper, so I'd imagine it's just a case of once he gets more experience next season, we will probably like iron that out a bit.
I think my way of looking at it, the only time I've ever played in goals is in the park with my mates, but I think when it comes to Kev, the thing that really kind of strikes me with a lot of people as well is he's 6'4", I think, if not taller. And he's a big guy when you see him. Like he came and spoke to us obviously early in the season in the Macmillan Lounge, and you could tell when he walked in, he's like ducking underneath the door and everything to get in. So he's a big guy. And I
think he's 6'7".
I didn't know he was that tall, but I knew he was at least 6'4" or above anyway. And that's probably the tallest keeper in the league, I would imagine. But at the same time, if in modern day football, referees give goalies so they're almost untouchable, like in the box. If they go down, usually they get a foul. And yet this season, I don't remember too many fouls where Kev's got one against him, probably because he's not coming to catch the ball. And I think a lot of keepers that do come to catch the ball, they do get fouls against them because they're just that maybe little bit more brave and going for it and knowing, oh, if I get any contact here, I'm just going to make sure that this is a foul against me. But that's my only sort of criticism when it comes to Kev, is just sort of balls coming in the air.
I think you're right. I think the referees, take that into account as well. Like when the goalkeeper goes up for a high ball, the defender crashes into them, and the referee thinks, he would have caught that otherwise. They're much more likely to give the free kick than if they're like, not convinced you were getting that seemed a bit wild. And there's sort of three in that second half. The first one it's a long free kick, and he's got a long, long time to watch it. And George Oakley comes kind of barreling in. And that's the one I think that's the one where, basically, because he's got a long time to watch it, he's a little bit, not so much that he's waiting for it, like he's got to wait for it, the ball's got to actually come to him, but he's a little bit static, and as Oakley comes across him, he's just, it doesn't look like he's about to catch it until Oakley crashes him. It looks like it's still kind of up for grabs, and I think that's why the referee lets him away with it, lets Oakley away with it. It doesn't come to anything, but that's the one that I think, and ultimately I think all of this, as you say, it comes down to experience. And it's about, placing your body and learning what you need to do to make sure that you either catch it or get the free kick, that there's not this kind of third option that's open. The two that come back to back, I actually think he is trying to catch the first one. And I think it's as you say, Callum, there's bodies in the way. I think he's got his hands together, and he kind of as he's catching it, he's then tipped forward, and that's where the ball goes away. And I think because he's tried to catch that one and not, when the second one comes in, he makes his mind up really early that he's going to punch it. Because you can see he's actually standing with his arm cocked, like, I'm definitely going to punch this.
Heavyweight boxing.
And yeah, and I mean, you hear goalie coaches say that, which is like, make your mind up early. If nothing else, at least just make your mind up and commit to it. And then he just doesn't get a kind of strong enough connection on it. But I think that's exactly what that comes down to, is it's experience. It's just time playing the game. Every time that happens, you learn a little bit more about it, and a lot of that we've known all along with Kevin Dabrowski, that on instinct he's incredible. Like his reactions and his agility and all that kind of stuff is excellent. The stuff that he needs to work on is the stuff that comes with experience, and that absolutely will come along. And that's same as you, Scott. Watching it yesterday and thinking, like, I'm glad this is happening in these games. That happens first 5 minutes in a really big game. It really gets the crowd on edge, and it encourages the opposition and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's, as I say, there's also in that second half a couple of saves in there as well, where he does very well. There's one that the camera almost misses it, but he's down very sharp to his right hand side, which again, whether he's 6'4" or 6'7" or somewhere in between, it's not easy actually getting down, when you're that size. And he's very good at that as well. You don't see him go with his feet too often. He gets down to a lot of stuff, which is not always the case with these bigger goalkeepers. But then what we've also got is the only other thing I've got noted down here, which is Callum Smith has a header that goes wide. I don't think there's a huge amount you can say about it. I am, as I've said before, I'm a big Callum Smith fan, so I'm inclined to give him the credit for kind of getting the space and getting up to it, and he gets a really good header on it. The fact it goes wide is really, well, you can't blame him for that, can you? But in terms of Callum Smith, then, Scott, where do you think Callum Smith's best position is? Within kind of the way that Ian Murray plays the game, where do you think Callum Smith's best used?
It's tricky because obviously at the start of the season we were actually playing almost a different formation in the League Cup groups, but I think that was down to the fact that we had a few like normal sort of starting players out. Like we had Scott Brown injured, Connolly was injured, and then we were also bedding in quite a few new players to the squad, like Smith, Mullen, and it was trying to see where they're going to work and who's working with who. And at the start of the season, I would have said to you that Smith was going to be a very good running off the shoulder striker, but now he's actually kind of proven that he can play out on the left, and he gives you obviously that bit of pace, but he works hard. And so, like, I don't think you can ever say that Callum Smith's a lazy player or ever not worked hard. Like, when he comes off the pitch, he looks pretty tired. And I mean, I always thought that whenever he's played, I'm surprised when it comes to, we've had a few times this season that have given us like the kilometres they've all run in a game. I'm usually surprised that he's not up there when he's played, because he seems to always be buzzing about when he's on. And I think somebody like Smith actually works well with somebody like a Vaughan, because Vaughan is more clever when he runs. He only goes for a proper run if he thinks, right, I'm definitely getting that ball, or I'm definitely going to cause something. Whereas Vaughan will not waste his energy when he thinks, I'm probably not going to win that. So it's more, you've got to try and get obviously pieces that work together. And I think that Smith works well with somebody like a Vaughan. But I'm still undecided whether I would rather see him, as I say, like, I remember going down to Annan at the start of the season in the League Cup group, and I actually thought he was brilliant off that shoulder and just running in behind. He got his goal down there by just sprinting away for everybody on a break. But, like, I don't think you're going to get him up front because you've got Vaughan, you've got Hamilton, you've got Rudden. So he's probably third, fourth choice in that four. And yeah, I just think he's a bit unlucky that he's going to have to play it wide at times. Whether he's happy enough to do that, I don't know. But if my next point was going to be that I think it's good to get game time now, but I don't see him starting in the playoffs. I think he'll be back on the bench, but he'll be a very good impact sub to bring on with legs late in a game. God be it if we have to go extra time in the second leg or whatever, but it'll be good to have somebody with that sort of pure pace late in a game. But when it comes to the playoffs, I actually want to have Josh Mullen on that left side. So sorry, Cal.
I was gonna say it's like an inverted Jamie Gullen, because it's like Gullen was meant to stay central, but he'd always drift out left. Callum Smith's like the opposite.
I think that's a pretty fair comparison, in as much as I think they occupy a very, very similar place in the squad. Probably why we didn't really kind of need to need to have both of them. So I was able to let Gullen go, as much as, you know, we were all big fans of him, but it is that sort of fill in and do a job basically anywhere, but not in very many people's kind of starting 11, including Ian Murray's. And you need players like that. I think the thing with Callum Smith is he's still pretty young. He's got plenty time to kind of develop, and it's whether he develops by, you know, nailing down a specific position and saying, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to play here, or whether it is a case of continue to kind of pop up everywhere. Because I mean, he's basically played left back for us at points this season, and pretty much everywhere forward from that. He's popped up everywhere as well. He's been off the right, and when he scored against the Airdrie at Starks Park or Queen's Park, kind of run down the kind of right flank. He came through. I think it was
Airdrie, because I remember Josh Reid looking like an idiot for the goal.
Aye, because he hasn't set himself at all, and he's just kind of
he couldn't tell you where he was in the box at that point.
Yeah. Well, speaking of falling over, actually, I was disappointed to see this didn't make the highlights. I thought there was one moment that really summed up that second half yesterday, where there's kind of loose ball in front of the Rovers' defence, and Duncan just puts his foot through it, or tries to put his foot through it, which is absolutely fine. And it kind of loops up into the air so that it's coming down about 35 yards out from goal or something. And both sides, nobody really moved. Nobody was like, just 10 minutes to go. I can't really be doing kind of busting a gut to go and get this. They're just kind of looked up and thought, it'll come down when it comes down. And the closest player to it, Robbie Crawford, was kind of underneath it. And as he looked up to kind of get himself into position, he tripped and fell over backwards. I thought, that's how you know it's a dead rubber. Where
the highlight should have just been that on loop for 8 minutes.
The game actually, we've not had a video game reference today, so I'll drop it in now. But the game actually reminded me. I don't know, like if either of you have overtime played Football Manager, and like there's so many times where you change.
I have too many hours.
when you it gets to games where you go, right, I've seen too many times of this, so I'm going to now change it to only you get the extended highlights, or you get only like goals or like big chances. And still in the ones that say big chances, there'll be times where the ball's just getting passed around and then it'll just go out for a goal kick and you're like, that was a big chance. That was what the game yesterday looked like. That's what it was.
Yeah, that was definitely, and again, kudos to Ray TV for squeezing every second out of an 8 minute highlight package for that. It was good going. It was like, you get these statistics sometimes for the people who don't actually understand football complain about, like, the ball was only in play for 48 minutes or whatever, and it's like, shut up, nobody cares. But there seemed to literally only be one ball at Capel yesterday. So there was points where the ball went into kind of the far side, the wee Dublin end. We just had to wait for a couple minutes, and then it seemed like the general consensus was fine. Okay, that's all right. So just have a wee blather amongst ourselves. The players can have a wee drink. It's fine. So yeah, very low stakes, very low.
It was a training match. That's what the game was. It was a training match.
I was surprised there was a couple of bookings in it, but but it wasn't played at like at walking pace or anything. Of course, Morton obviously picked up a couple of bookings, booking 105 and 106 of the season for poor misunderstood Morton, just booting everything that moves. I think that's probably about all we need to say about that. I enjoyed my afternoon. But not one that will live long in the memory, much like the last time we played Morton and drew 0-0. Now, the Thursday night, the preview, Scott, you were there. The other guys were talking about, for obvious reasons, that attention's kind of already turned to the playoffs, and we do still have another game to go, and we'll have a preview for that later in the week. But Callum, you've kind of put together, or you're prepared to give us a little bit of a runners and riders in terms of the playoffs. So just for anybody who's not familiar, kind of how the playoffs work, who's going to be in them, or kind of who from the Premiership might still be involved with 3 or 4 games still to go for Premiership.
Yeah, they just started to split, so they would have had match. This would be match week 34, so they'll have another 4 games. So. The Premiership promotion playoffs are different than the promotion playoffs in League 1 and League 2 in that they start a couple of weeks before the Premiership finishes, hence why it's different. So with League 1 and League 2's promotion, of course with the leagues finishing at the same time, the team that finishes 4th will play the team that finishes second bottom in the league above. In this, for the Championship though, because the extra weeks in the Premiership, is 3rd against 4th. In this case, it'll be Partick against Airdrie. That's all confirmed. I think that was confirmed like a week or 2 ago. It was just a case. It's like that game that they played where Partick thrashed Airdrie. That was basically to decide who gets the home game as the second leg. So how it'll be is those 2 teams will play against each other. And then the week after, we'll have the Tuesday and the Friday games against the winner of that game. Winner of that game will face off against whoever finishes 11th in the Premiership. In the Premiership, the teams that look to be in that relegation battle, you have Livingston, who are bottom. They did beat Ross County to stave off relegation for another week, but let's face it, they are not staying up. I do not want to see them in 11th. It's pretty much between Ross County and St Johnstone. And with Ross County, they seem to be the one in a bit of form. I think it's Don Cowy's the manager. He's got them playing well. They beat Rangers just before the split. Although, then again, they did just lose to Livingston. Welcome to the cinch. And then the other team that looks to be in that fight is St Johnstone. And St Johnstone just got beat 3-1 off of Hibs in pretty pathetic manner. It's like St Johnstone, they're the team that we're going to face, I reckon, just because of the fact they do not score goals. They have like 24. I think it's about 24 goals they've scored this season in the league, which is ridiculously low.
They scored late on against Hibs yesterday. They could take them to 25, which is one more than Livingston.
It's like Livingston are just like adrift at the bottom.
I think it'll be interesting as well, because St Johnstone play Ross County on the second last day of the season, so that might decide who's going to be 11th by that time. So it'll be interesting to see, and it's St Johnstone that are at home that game. So again, we'll see how that one pans out.
Yeah, I think that was the big shock yesterday was Livingston beating Ross County, because prior to that, Callum, that was exactly where you are. I thought it just looks like St Johnstone don't have an awful lot about them. They beat Hibs, I'm sure, just before the split, but that seems like a kind of freak occurrence. Whereas Ross County Ross County under Don Cowy look much better than they ever looked under Derek Adams. You thought, they'll get enough kind of points on the board. But now, St Johnstone at a point more than Ross County, and they still have Livingston to play, and you kind of have to assume that, as you say, Livingston aren't going to go and win 3 or 4 games post-split, having won 4 all season. So chances are, now after yesterday, I would be I would be more inclined to think St Johnstone might actually scrape ahead of Ross County, but it will definitely be interesting to see. That game, the second last game, will be huge. And the other factor in that, as we kind of touched upon earlier, is, and obviously there's a huge, obviously we'd have a semi-final to get through first, and we're not going to get ahead of ourselves by any means at all. But if we do get to the final of the playoffs, we will be without someone. Obviously, unless Motherwell collapse or Livingston have a heroic recovery. Because if it's St Johnstone, we won't have James Brown right back, and if it's Ross County, we won't have Kyle Turner in that kind of midfield place. But I think you're right. The other big thing with this is having that week off is a real kind of boon. And I think I'm right in saying nobody's ever been promoted from 4th in the Championship.
I think it's happened once, and it was Hamilton, I think, beat Hibs on penalties.
That would make sense. Because it's a tough schedule to do it from 4th or 3rd, really. It's a tough schedule to go basically 6 weeks. 6 games.
Partick nearly did it last season.
Yeah, well, they should have.
In fact, they really should have.
But it was... I think the thing for finishing second as well is you've got the semi-final Tuesday, Friday they've announced it as, but I'm pretty certain that's the same weekend as the last game of the SPL, so you're actually still getting a good, nearly a week off till the first leg of the final, if you get through. So at the end of the day, you're playing 2 games in 3 nights or 4 nights or whatever it is for the semi-final, but you're then getting your normal sort of 5, 6, maybe even 7 days till the first leg of that one against the SPL club. So I think I don't think it should be too taxing on the players, to be honest. I think the fact that we've got the week off, the guys will obviously be in training hard as well, but yeah, just don't try and push it too hard, because the guys at the end of the day, they've been playing 10 months of the year, so I think by now they don't really need too much other than just a bit topping up when it comes to fitness.
Yeah, and that's
bounce game against Bucky.
And that's one of the big differences of this season to last season. Famously last year we were the only team who couldn't move on the last day of the season. So the teams going into the playoffs were still having to go kind of hell for leather on the last day. Whereas with this one, I think Airdrie, they're 3 points behind Thistle with a 10 goal kind of deficit. So it's not completely beyond the realms of possibility. Thistle, I think, have to go to Tannadice. You could. Dundee United have turned over enough teams, but Rhys McCabe's already come out and said, I'm not playing for that. I'm resting players. I'm going to put a reserve side on the last day. So it is slightly, you'd think teams would be slightly better prepared going into these playoffs. But let's, for the sake of the illusion of podcast structure, let's bring back an old favourite. Let's have a big question, which, frankly, I'm still just continuing on the same conversation, but I like framing it as a big question. As things stand right now, based on everything we know, would you rather go into the playoff semi-final and play Airdrie or play Partick Thistle? And Cal, start with you. Who would you rather have?
Partick Thistle.
All right, justify your answer, please.
I hate Airdrie. I just want to see them be miserable. Also, Foothill's a better away day, isn't it? It's much better to go to. But yeah, it's like we've actually got a decent record against Thistle versus whatever we have against Airdrie. Is 5 games and 4 losses and a draw. You don't really want that going into a playoff.
I thought it was quite interesting, actually. I was reading a bit about Airdrie supporters talking about the teams that they've struggled against this season. And they were basically saying that the teams they've struggled against are teams who've got a big striker who's gone and roughed them up. We've got one of those as well. It's just not worked at all. It's difficult to kind of pin down. Scott, what about you? If you had the choice, if you could pick now, Thistle or Airdrie?
I think it's tough. I think, to be honest, Thistle, they're quite used to the playoffs. They've been in it quite a lot in recent years, so I think they'll have guys that have been there and done it in terms of winning some playoff games. So I think whoever we get, it's going to be a very tough two legs, no matter if it's AirJ or... Everyone's going to probably say Partick because of just recent history. If you told us at the start of the season, before the ball was kicked, you're going to finish second and you're going to play either AirJ or Partick, you're going, oh, let's take AirJ because they've no beat us since 2011. But like this season, it's just completely flipped and we can't beat them for some reason. Although one thing I will say, and I do say it whenever it comes to playoffs in any sport, absolutely form goes out the window because at that point you're playing for... It's just you've got nothing else other than you must win that game. There's not, oh, you get them 3 more times in the season to rectify it. It's you have to win now. Otherwise, yeah, you're away on holiday by Monday. So yeah. I'm not too... I say I'm not worried. I'm not too... I've not got a problem if we do get AirJ, put it that way, because I do think that they've still got a lot of inexperienced young guys who, at the end of the day, if they manage to get past Partick, then fair play, but I just think that this might be a bit too much or too early for them in the Championship. Everybody had them down to finish sort of 8th, 9th, 10th this season just because they came up on... Mind you, they only got up on penalty kicks last season, so like... Yeah, and then they got raided in terms of, like say, Smith came to us. There's a few other boys that had left, but they also kept a good squad who brought them to the Championship. But I do think, I'll say Partick just for the...
I think we've lost Scott in the middle of a very passionate answer there, which I was enjoying, which is a real shame. And to be honest, we're close enough to the end of the episode that I'm just going to carry on. And basically do a wrap up anyway. To be honest,
I was going to say, like, I'll take hope from the fact that down south Maidstone, they lost both their games against Aveley in the National League South, but then beat them in the playoffs. So if we can just do the same as Maidstone and not do what they did today, where it's like they hit the bar and then 60 seconds later Worthing go up the other end and score to win the game. Don't do that. Do the other bit.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say with that is one of the few downsides, I suppose, if you want to call it that, of being the team that finished in second. It means that whoever you play in the semi-final is flying, whether it's Thistle or whether it's Airdrie. Psychologically, at least, and you talk about all this, well, who's got psychological advantage? If you've just won a 2-legged game or a 2-legged tie, you're going to be flying. So whether it's Airdrie or whether it's Thistle, they're going to be on a high. And yeah, I would say Airdrie have got the added advantage that they've got a very easy narrative from the games between us this season. And I mean, I have to tell you, if I could choose, I would also be picking Thistle based on kind of the games that we've had and seen this season. I think even Friday night, Airdrie played against Dundee United. I thought they were very impressive. Dundee United visibly hungover, but still did a very good job of actually taking the game to Dundee United. You know, it wasn't just a case of Airdrie played on the break or waited for them to make mistakes. I thought they were very, very proactive, and we've said before that there's a lot to like about this Airdrie side, annoyingly and disappointingly. But I don't think that there is anything to fear by any means at all from these playoffs. Like, there's a reason we've finished second and finished, clear of both of these sides. So there will be more playoff chat to come. As I say, really, we just needed something else to talk about because we drew 0-0 with Morton yesterday and nothing happened. But that was a nice little conversation. I enjoyed the bit of a chat about that, and I see there will definitely be more of that as we get through the Arbroath game and then actually get into these playoffs games themselves. So I think that will do us for today. Thank you everybody for watching and for listening. As I said, we will be back later in the week. We'll have another preview of another dead rubber against the old down tools Arbroath. Try to see if the only tool they can send down is Duncan Ferguson. That would be good. Anyway, so that's to come on Friday night. We'll be back at some point before then to preview it, and we will see you then. Goodbye.